call the Finance Committee meeting to order on Wednesday, October 16th. I have with me in the room Andy Olderman, Dean Hodis, Maury Creighton, Tom Parkins, Peter Twining, and Town Administrator Greg Fetterspiel. Don't see Mike on Zoom. He may join us. So the first item on the agenda is to discuss the long-term capital plan. Sent us an email, which I printed, but it's not with me. So where do you want to start, Greg? That's all right, I got it on my phone. With the 26 to 30 fiscal year draft.
Might make more sense to focus on bonding and the facilities plan.
Okay,
And hear your thoughts. I think that's the harder of the two. You know, and sort of what I'm calling the regular capital, as I indicated, I bumped it up closer to the 4 million range
Yeah.
versus 3 million. That sort of chugs along. There are obviously some issues to resolve, but I think the long-term facility planning issues loom larger. You know,
Right.
take
Before you make that transition,
hi,
when you go
John.
to the 3 to the 4, does that
I'll
keep
be in and
up
out.
with the necessary road and pipe work? I mean, in your opinion, does that keep us moving more rapidly enough in the direction on pipes and roads, which I think are more large part of the 3 and 4 number?
no, for the most part, there are some exceptions to that. There's Chuck put in the Tappan Street project. for
Mhm,
example,
mhm.
And Bennett Street.
Yes,
So those were two, I think they were both targeted around 4 million apiece.
yes.
So those.
That's why I'm asking the question.
Those don't
actually.
fit into that regular category.
And how do we fit those, just again, while we're speaking about this area?
So I put the Tappan one in. I don't show the Bennett one yet, depending on what happens with the library. So I am showing significant money going to the library,
Yes.
assuming it's not getting the grant. But if it does, that changes that frees up $2.5 million. And then that could be combined with some other fine tuning to get the Bennett project in the next few years.
But the Bennett project can withstand that uncertainty, that it may be able to be substituted in for the library if we get the grant,
Right.
or not.
Right.
Okay.
Just hold on. Gail, Mike Pratt has joined us via Zoom and John Round is in the room from the select board. Thank you. Go ahead, Dean.
On Tappan, one of the reasons why that was put on hold a couple of years ago is because of drainage right away stuff. Has that been resolved? That we can, so now we have the green light.
So again, before sort of diving into the details, I think maybe we take a 60,000 foot view of what it's trying to do. So a lot of big ticket items here. And
Greg, before you get going, which attachment are you looking at?
so this is the facility financing plan.
Okay, thank you.
So it's the one that has FY26 all the way out to FY
40 or
48
something.
or
Yeah.
50.
Gail, Kathy Bellata from Select Board has also joined us in the room. Sorry, I just like to make sure Gail knows who's here.
So just to explain what this spreadsheet is trying to show, it's showing what are potentially the big facility projects over the next 25, 30 years. We've already approved the 7.5 million for water and sewer upgrades. That's, the voters have approved that. So I'm showing that the bond payments start in 27. It's showing 23 million for the PFAS and dredging work. I'm making some assumptions about that number coming in a little lower because of the potential for the PFAS number, a little lower, hopefully because of some grant and litigation.
So this is without grants necessarily.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that, there could be grants in addition to that
Yes,
number. So about 21 of that is for PFAS, assuming 5 million comes in for grants and 2 million our share of the dredging.
Greg, can I just ask a question about that? So is that 2 million for the dredging, assuming funds from other areas like harbor funds are going into this? Because I think 2 million for dredging over this time frame is pretty. I mean,
Correct.
so there
so
must be
that's
some
just-
other source.
That's just the next dredging project. It doesn't include others beyond that.
And that's assuming 2 million from the state, right?
Assumes 1 million from the
A
state.
million from the state.
But that's looking out to fiscal year 40.
So I haven't plugged in another round of dredging beyond that. This dredging, I'm showing it being funded 100% through the general fund, not through the waterways fund. So I'm making the assumption that over the 10 to 15 years before another phase kicks in, we would have sufficient funds in the waterway fund to do that.
For the future, is it possible to separate out the PFAS and the dredging?
Yeah.
Because I see those as completely different
Well, they are.
in my brain.
Yes. I can certainly do that. So just going down the list, again, big assumptions and need a lot of discussions. I'm showing a DPW garage, 22 million. The Essex Elementary at 27. The new public safety building, and some rehab to this building, town hall, 30 million, showing that out in 35 kicking in, FY 35. And then the next line, resiliency project, seawalls, culvert expansions. So that is being proposed to be funded over that 25, 30-year period through capital exclusions. So as debt is retired, existing debt and new debt is retired, I make the assumption that we will backfill those debt service dollars into capital exclusion dollars
for that particular.
for those purposes.
No, does that preclude, I mean, the option earlier about whether we're gonna pay them off level funded or declining payments? Does that affect that calculation as well?
It will affect it year to year, but not the bottom line total. So it'll alter those year to year numbers.
I mean, if we have level funded, we won't have that shot every year for capital exclusion, right?
Well, you'll still see some decline, but yes, if you level.
If we
fund
do it in
100%,
all the bonds, but we could do it in different, yeah, okay.
So just to be clear, you're looking at that starting 23 years from now, roughly 22 years from now, pretty far out.
No, I show that, so if you go to the bottom of the spreadsheet, that last line, if it's a negative number,
Got it, okay,
those dollars then become available for capital exclusions.
okay.
So
Okay.
it starts in 30,
Mhm.
pretty modest amount, but then it ramps up fairly quickly.
One rock in a seawall.
Yeah, so it really
Pencil sharpening.
kicks in, by 33.
Yep.
And then 34 it takes a big jump because we have retired high school.
Mhm. Right.
So
And
that's,
OPEB too,
and then OPEB kicks in, exactly. And then the last big project, and again, it's a big number and it's a placeholder only. But I wanted to see how we could absorb it if we had to, is a relocation of the sewer plant in late 2040s. For $70 million price tag. And as an exercise, it shows that we can do that without a new rise in taxes at that level, because there's enough in the system already. But that assumes that voters have approved those previous debts.
But before we did that, we would do a study
Oh,
to see
absolutely,
whether to keep
Oh,
it
yeah.
in place.
yes. Yeah, so the alternative is to build a pretty high dike around
Right,
the plant. Wouldn't cost 70 million to do that.
right,
Um,
exactly.
So that is definitely an alternative that we wanna kick the tires on pretty hard.
Greg, one question, I'm sorry, I wasn't listening. So we spend about 3 million a year on capital. Is that
3 to 5.
outside of this plan?
Outside of this
Okay.
completely.
He's up to 4 million,
Well,
if you weren't listening to that.
sorry.
So this facility plan that you see here is strictly what would be done through bonding. It is separate from what I call our regular capital, which is, again, I'm proposing to be in that $4 million range going forward.
And do we expect any state funding for PFAS?
Oh, we certainly hope to, yes.
Okay.
Or it's federal. more
Well,
than-
it could be federal pass through
Yeah.
the state, yes.
But
Would they
if it's a federal pass through the state, then the state has discretion as to who receives it, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
So that, and MBTA stuff. yeah.
right.
Put the brakes on federal.
So then you see revenues, right? So those are the possible expenditures for big ticket items. And then I obviously make a number of assumptions about revenues. So the first line, water capital fee. So we instituted a new fee for the meters. Bringing about 500,000 a year. I'm assuming that we will keep that in place to pay for future water capital. And then I assume that we would do a similar amount in the sewer. With sewer fees, ramping up to again about 500,000, and then I show those continuing on. The duration of the years.
Why are we doing it in fees rather than general taxes?
Again, that's a discussion that we can have.
Okay.
It's, left pocket, right pocket.
To be determined, right?
Yeah, I mean, it just. I don't know.
So for water, it's very similar population.
Right.
Most everyone who's on 98% of the town is on town water. And 100% of people paying taxes.
And it made sense to do the fee because today, if we need a new water meter, we buy it. So it made sense to do the fee for the purposes of the water meter project. Because we would, when mine broke, I had to pay for a water meter.
Well,
It wasn't, it was a couple $100, I think. That my own that didn't include installation. I had to install, well.
Great. Can I ask a
so
question about
on
that?
sewer, it's a different story.
Right,
Yeah,
yes.
Maybe a third, maybe half of the homes.
I
are
thought it
on
was
sewer.
2/3.
Yeah, it could be closer to
I thought Chuck
2/3.
said 2/3, which
Uh,
surprised me.
60 some odd percent, but yes, yeah, it's in that range.
Greg, the column that's headed term in years, that's the bonds term?
Correct.
Thanks.
So I show two different terms. I show a 15-year.
Yep.
And a 30-year.
Yep, I just wanted to be sure I knew what it referred to.
And then I show you my assumptions down below about the annual
Right.
debt service on per million. So moving down the revenue line, again, these sort of all points of discussion that we need to come to agreement on. I'm showing CST as a new tax revenue, phase 1 in 27, and then phase 2 kicking in by 2034.
Never get phase 1 approved.
Right. So then we show current debt being retired, how much we're saving each year and reallocating to new bonds. Again, for the schools, same thing, existing school debt being retired and reallocating those savings to new bonds. And then you see this retiree liabilities fully funded and reallocated. So that's both the pension liability and the OPEB liability, the health insurance liability.
What year does it come into
So again,
effect?
I'm showing that in 30, kicking in 35.
35.
But I thought we were gonna pay OPEB before that.
I think we will.
Okay,
Again, I'm
okay.
being a little
Just an
conservative here.
assumption. Yep,
Yeah.
okay.
Much, the pension may take a couple of years longer.
Yeah.
So that's what hedge my bets and split the difference.
And just remind me again, Greg, the pension impact is affected by healthcare. So if healthcare rises, every year we wait for the healthcare number, and that does drive the OPEB
Right.
embedded cost.
Yes,
So that's just something to keep in mind here. That is a wild card a little bit.
yes, and we're about to enter. And we're gonna return to likely double-digit inflation on health insurance.
Hold on, Mike Pratt, your hand is raised.
Yeah, I just had a quick question for Greg. You know, leaving aside, whether it's a debt exclusion or a capital exclusion or the regular 2.5, like, is there somewhere in here where you can see kind of the all-in year-over-year percentage increase?
Right, so if you look at the very bottom of this spreadsheet,
Line 22.
if you look at line 22, it shows the projected tax increase for just the bonding.
Line 22 of which, I'm looking at something that's got like 90 rows, 100 rows.
If you look at the spreadsheet that's titled facility financing,
Yeah, oh, not CIP, okay.
yeah.
Okay,
So it shows 3 painful years. It shows 27, 28, and 29 as having to increase taxes to start paying off new bonds. So it shows roughly a 3% increase in 27 due to bonds, a 6% increase in 28, and then a 5% increase in 29. So you're looking at 14% tax increase if we were to move forward with this plan.
And is there any reason why we couldn't defer the DPW garage? I know they want it, but
Well,
that
so
would be an option. I mean, PFAs, we can't defer.
can you delay, can you? Yes, I mean, all of this is
Yeah, okay.
up to different options. Can you put that off for 3 years? I mean, yes, you could.
Or do it for less than projected.
Right, so that's all part of the discussions. Are there different projects that have come in less money? Et cetera. So again, lot of issues to resolve here, but I'm just trying to present
Right,
a scenario that says, okay, if we make these assumptions about these are the costs of the projects, that's one big assumption, right? And then assumption about the year they take place, another big assumption, and then how we pay for it. So
And those
again,
projected tax increases on top of the 2.5, we
Correct.
try to stay under. So
that's exactly what I was gonna ask. So you add 2.5 to all those 3 numbers?
correct.
right.
or slightly less.
Right.
is-
2 to 2.5 certainly has been our history. Again, you can say, all right, we're gonna work really hard to reduce operating costs and try to find savings so we can drive more money into capital. So again, that's part of the discussion here about what is possible.
Now-
But if you add that 2.5, you get 5.4, 8.5, and 7.4, or cumulative, it's like over 21% over those 3 years.
That's right.
Painful.
Mhm.
Now, when we talk about the public safety building, we've got that in there for 30 million plus town rehab, so it's less than 30. Do we have the land? to Put it on, or is that a potential fact that we would need land?
So again, we need to kick the tires on different options.
Yeah,
If DPW were to go up to the old site, public safety potentially could go to where DPW is now. Alternatively, you might be able to squeeze public safety and DPW up at the compost site.
Okay.
Have to see if that's feasible.
Yep.
Could you put public safety at Sweeney Park and have new fields someplace else?
Yep.
You know, again, lots of different scenarios here, and,
But
they
they
all need
all,
to be explored.
yeah, and they all impact the cost,
Exactly,
right?
for sure.
So Greg, a question sort of about capacity here. I mean, if we look at roughly 225 million over 25 years. And then we're doing 3 to 4 million annually, which is another 75 to 100. You know, we're looking at over a 25-year period, 300 to 325 million, which is a lot. I'm just wondering about our capacity to deal with that. And I know 25 years is a long time, but I mean, if you think about it as a ratio of annual run rate, it's like 8x of a year's budget. It's a lot
It's
a lot of change and a lot of management. You know, a lot of things have to kind of come into line to do this.
Absolutely. You know, unfortunately, I think we also have a lot of pressure, not just because of age of structures, but because of what's happening with sea level rise and storms. Right, so public safety is in real danger. Being flooded out and not being available to provide their services in that emergency because they're flooded out and can't operate. The sewer plant, we've got to figure out something for that sewer plant to continue to operate. Maybe we can get away with a much less expensive approach by that building, by making it an island, basically. Need to explore that further.
And both of those kind of wind into doing something about the town hall lot, and whether we can put some lightweight fill and start doing something in the interim, or whether it has to be a dike, or, you know, that might affect the success of doing something in the interim like that, might determine how soon we have to move on
Correct.
this. Yeah,
Yes, absolutely.
I know they're not in the bond part, they're gonna be in the capital part, but
Well, some of that will have to be.
yeah, that's a big
So I've
one.
got that, again, that sort of catch-all 45 million for different resiliency projects. And what's going to be possible to get permits for,
Right.
and all of this stuff. It's just, again, a lot of variables.
Are the permitting agencies gonna change their tune and be a little more rapid in their response? Given sea level rise and,
So
Potentially.
those discussions are happening.
Okay.
A lot of communities are knocking on DEP's door and the governor's door saying, look, something's got to give you. We need A, more flexibility, and B, more definitive, quicker responses so that we can start moving these projects. So it hasn't been resolved, but the questions are being asked.
So, hey, Greg, you have in fiscal 27, that's the DPW building, 21.45 million? Am I reading that right?
About 22 million, yeah. Rounded to 22, yeah.
Sure, in fiscal 27.
we're starting the
Correct.
bond payments. So
I'm
we
just looking
know
at a
that-
summary capital plan and it shows a column fiscal
Well,
27 facilities, 21.45 million.
Right, so again, we're on the facility financing one, which is a little. It shows the financing of that debt service.
But
Okay.
but
Anyways, but it does show it in 27.
it implies that the project has started probably the year before and is,
Yeah, realistically, 26 is gonna be the design year, and if all those things aligned, it would get started in 27, so.
Yeah.
I've got that a little early in terms of
Yeah.
payments.
I don't see how realistically we can even entertain the thought of that in fiscal 27, given the cost of PFAS and like you said, emergency services get moved away from seawater, water treatment, but that seems crazy.
So there's a bit of a domino effect though, because the the first domino to fall in the planning that's been done would be the DPW garage to free up that space on Pleasant Street. Now, what becomes of that space, you know, again, if one option, because of the problems of making a good field at Sweeney is so problematic, some new thinking is perhaps we look for a new place for the field and use Sweeney for a building location. Smaller footprint, you can deal with the water, more space to deal with the water. But again, that needs engineering. That's part of the work that needs to be done.
I had felt that DPW current areas would be good for like between the cemetery expansion, the ball field, and maybe some housing around the side. You know, it seems like a good thing to look at for that area, because it's so, you know, there's so many residences. That it would be good for ball.
But it points to a more specific study that evaluates the different permutations of things. And, you know, I mean, certainly, I mean, I think we all kind of echo Mike's comment, you know, just, you know, it's hard to otherwise rationalize the DPW garage survives the priority discussion when it comes to, you know, PFAS and, you know, it may be too weighty a process to make the public safety dependent upon a solution for DPW. You know, we might have to just pursue public safety independently, which means it doesn't go on Pleasant Street. Just to
Right,
throw one thought out there,
Mhm.
but,
right, they are interrelated, so that's.
yeah, well, potentially.
Yeah.
They are and they're not. I mean, they're only interrelated if public safety relies on DPW
Correct.
being relocated from its current spot.
Right, to build on what Andy just said, there has to be, you know, there's always a plan A, B, C, D. So if plan A is using the lot on Pleasant Street, let's look at a plan B and C, you know, whatever that is. You know, building up the foundation or seawall or whatever. I'm not the civil engineer, but you know, again, plan B, C, and D.
And when we do that Central Street culvert, what impact is that gonna have on the area around the fire station?
It'll help a little.
Okay,
It's not gonna help in the big storm.
yeah,
It's gonna prevent it from flooding in the smaller storm that it currently floods now. But it won't protect it from the 500-year storm. Which seems to be happening on a regular basis, but anyway,
What's happening on that parcel of land on School Street that church is supposed to go on?
the church is still planning to go there.
That's still,
I mean, I agree that would be a nice,
We actually talked to
Parcel.
them recently, and their plan is still
on course.
to raise sufficient money. They're still in the raising money phase, but their plan is still to build the church out there. And they don't want,
And the right of first refusal.
they don't want like any housing with it or anything. They want to use the entire parcel.
Is there, do I recall there was a right of first refusal held by the town on that parcel, or is that now expired?
There was one on the Cornerstone Church in town, and that expired many years ago now.
Thought so.
It was for 3 years, and I don't,
So sort of a,
go ahead,
Just
John.
question, Greg, did you explore at all, it was brought up a little bit earlier, putting together public safety and DPW with the former Black Earth site, is that at all possible? Is there enough space there?
there could be.
Good,
We don't know for sure, but yes,
it's an
it's
expensive
worth
site to
exploring.
develop. 'Cause it's-
yeah, but it's all in one place.
Right.
Which builds some efficiencies in there.
Yeah,
I think when we,
Chuck is on the line. I think he's had some conversations with our engineers on that.
Oh, Chuck, go ahead. Chuck Dam. go ahead.
Sorry, just looking for the mute button. So like right now we have a kind of preliminary design contracts where we're investigating the School Street site. We have geotech and survey going on there. We'll delineate the wetlands at the bottom. I'm definitely gonna look further into, co-locating the public safety with the DPW. However, it needs to be said that the way to do it would be to put the public safety portion building somehow situated along the frontage, probably right at the corner where school and Atwater meet. So there's a little bit of a shelf there and a lower, lower profile than the, higher up area where the, current compost piles are. That would, to site any building down there, would require the LCD, planning board, ZBA, special permit process that would allow a building to be there. That's currently not allowed. That's why it wasn't really heavily considered in the facility master plan. To do that kind of goes in the face of everything that has been said already when it was vetted out for CST and the sight lines for that facility from 128 and so on, as well as obviously the 40B that was on across the street at Shingle Hill, as well as the rock removal that has been going on for CST and the consternation that caused the neighbors. That would also be part of that project. So I would say that anything is possible. Certainly at this level, we can certainly make it work. But there are significant hurdles that I see ahead of time that kind of gets us bogged down in some of these projects where it sounds good on paper, it works on paper, it works with the select board and the FinCom, but then there's these other special interests that will determine whether or not that project can go forward and at what cost. It would also take some wetland conservation muscle to do something in that spot. So I think it's a bigger conversation at a town level at some point. But these are some of the pitfalls that we get into when we think about it, at this level and not, further down the road. So I guess that's just my tale of caution on that one.
Isn't
And
it
we will look at it.
It's part of the LCD, yes.
Oh, okay. So it's no different from the compost site up higher as far as allowing to
In
build
terms
a
of
building.
zoning, it's the same zoning.
Yeah,
district,
okay,
yes.
that's what I thought. So
But
it's,
the setbacks from the road are what it will require. And it's not an ideal location from
okay.
the public safety perspective in terms of response times and being kind of not in the kind of center of town, which even if it went to Pleasant Street, it wouldn't be in the center. But we're just getting further away and more in the single point of failure type of scenario. If a tree comes down across School Street, or things like that are things that public safety thinks about more in terms of their response time and effort in that way. So again, it's totally possible, totally feasible, but there are significant buy-in that we would need to really bring that forward.
For the town parking lot.
I think our options are so limited in
Yeah,
town,
exactly,
that we have to consider everything.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. It's,
Yeah, I'm totally on board. I just it needs to be said.
Greg, just going back to the plan at hand, did you kind of do any banding on this to sort of say, okay, in an absolute best case scenario, this 225 number might be 200 or 180. And then in the absolute worst case, I'm wondering what that error envelope looks like, and because 25 years is a long time, and if we have a problem with like Gravelly Pond or our water supply because of something, or some other PFAS comes rolling along in the next 10 years, plans change. So
I look at this as being at least plus or minus 50%.
yeah, I was
Because,
gonna say,
there's lots of things. I mean, in 70 years, we'll probably have to be doing some projects on the schools again. In some ways, right?
probably earlier than that, yeah.
We're replacing, we're doing, potentially other things. Yeah, so, it's good to list out what we can thoughtfully, identify today.
Yeah.
But, it's, this is stratosphere level.
Yeah.
What which I think is still useful to do. For
But the
sure.
high
Yeah,
school
but
will be
it's
40
the
years old.
difficulty of, making this with any precision.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think we can hold anybody to, you've taken a stab at identifying a start time for some of these things, which I think is helpful.
This is
You know,
very-
it gives us something to think about and relative to the other priorities and the urgency of things that, jeopardize the town's basic functions, needing to take precedence over things that are, wants and desires.
Yeah, to say the same thing that Andy just said, like, I would hope that this is, if you're thinking of bookends, this is the right bookend, the worst case scenario. And, like, I mean, if any, like, hopefully there's a way to come inside of this, right?
It's up to 10% of our
Well,
budget.
construction costs are going up and permitting has gotten more difficult. And so if you follow these trends, I'm not sure this is a bookend, but it's a great starting place. I mean, it's a data point in the ground.
Yep.
And,
I mean, obviously I'm a private sector guy. I know there's other people on the committee, private sector, but you think of a leverage ratio. I mean, I'm thinking you're talking 40 million a year, right? Roughly is annual town revenue. And this is over 5x, right? I mean, I know it doesn't happen all at once, but still that's not a good leverage ratio.
It will be up to 10% of the budget by, the 8 million a year debt service.
That's assuming you take on all that debt and don't get dinged on a rating, which, like,
Right.
I'd believe you would.
Greg, what did you maybe have on this plan that you didn't put onto this plan? If anything?
So like I say, the Bennett Street isn't on there. And sort of future Bennett Tappan type projects.
Yeah.
They're not on here. We're trying to fund some pipe work in the regular capital by taking the year off and doubling up, that type of thing. So it's light on pipe replacement. It doesn't have a major library renovation or expansion.
And ballpark,
What
what are you
about-
thinking about there? Like, what's that rough number?
Well, it's hard to say, I know the trustees have
Grandiose
something
plans.
in mind, and I think, if we have the new Mason building come online for meeting space and programming space, and the library's 2 doors down, I think that could solve that particular problem. So I think the library project could change pretty significantly.
And I think the assumption in the funding for the library was if they got the state grant, that the majority of the money could be raised via donations.
Right.
I think
So
that
the-
was.
So between the significant state grant and donations, you are likely to cover the
But
lion's share of it.
the state grant goes out the window if the MBTA zoning doesn't pass.
Right.
Just like so many other things. And there's nothing in here for the senior center. You're
No,
assuming that,
again, we're assuming that's privately funded effort.
what happens if it isn't? Would it be in regular capital?
So this has really caught the big items. All the foreseeable big items. Equipment, rolling stock, all fits in annual, pipes, tar,
Yes.
surfaces.
Yeah.
Um,
No, this certainly captures the bulk of the big ticket item. So in some ways, I think this, in terms of the continuum, this is more of a worst case than
Right.
least expensive case.
So we're paying for one school, we're paying for two schools at the moment. And probably by 2050, we'll be looking pretty seriously at a replacement for the high school. Because at that point, it'll probably be about 40 years old.
Hopefully,
give or
lots
take.
longer than-
Hopefully, but.
Yeah.
You know, I think we've sort of thought about this a year or two ago, that we'll always be kind of thinking about school.
Yep.
We build one and one drops off, and as soon as it drops off, we're kind of thinking about the next one. Now,
Sometimes we're building.
enrollment's going down,
A
but,
major renovation, I mean, it may,
Yeah.
you know, you can,
but that sounds like that might be like in 2051 or shortly after this plan is.
I mean, this school committee has hinted at, you know, multi-million, 5 million plus minus renovation at the high school in the 30s sometime.
Yeah. But that gets effectively absorbed into our annual operating with debt with the school.
You know, so again, I don't specifically show that, but do you take some of that capital exclusion money to do that for 1 year if you need to?
I'm just sort of trying to look at it from the point of view of banding is.
Yeah.
What happens to this number in best case, worst case? I mean,
Yeah, I think the DPW garage is the elephant in the room.
What?
DPW garage is the elephant in the room as to when it makes sense to start that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, it is, you know, it is a need,
Yeah,
but it doesn't,
Right.
doesn't rise to the same urgency as some other things at the moment.
not, when you see that fiscal year 28, 6% increase, that's painful.
But unless, you know, I mean, where public safety, you know, as mentioned, if the whole thing got done as one.
Yeah.
And there was some, you know, certainly cost efficiency in approaching the whole thing that way.
Well, it's my understanding that there's funds available in the state for like building DPW garages and building public safety facilities. I mean, Rockport got something for its DPW facility that it's afraid of losing.
They got an earmark for that. The state has,
You have to apply to it.
right, but the state has discussed, the bill was written, but it didn't go anywhere,
Okay,
to create a municipal building fund similar to the MSBA.
okay.
There's a good chance that something like that will happen over the next 5 years.
Yeah.
You know, it takes a while for these ideas to.
Of course, I don't know if that just increases the overall cost or.
I'm gonna say
What?
the money comes with strings attached.
Right.
It does, but they're, I think just based on the MSBA guideline,
Mhm.
there's a lot of sense to the strings. The reason the whole MSBA process came about was because some school projects just going off into, you know, some crazy direction.
Yeah.
And so the MSBA kind of really, it defines a process and it puts some limits on it. But there are it's a push-pull thing for sure.
I'm not sold on it based on what I've seen in some of my prior towns, the numbers are staggering.
If you're gonna speak, you need to speak loud.
Sorry, yeah, no, side comment.
Okay, should we move on to the other report?
So the other spreadsheet, as I say, focuses on that, what I call the regular capital. It does show those big bonds, but the focus is on the smaller items, those annual items. So again, the summary page lists the 5 years and the totals, you know, first the expenses and then the revenue sources for each year. And so you'll see obviously the bonding that comes into play. So, and then each year then has its own spreadsheet and has its own tab in the spreadsheet. So, And they're pretty similar each year, so, you know, in DPW, we have road, we have equipment. We have, drainage and sidewalks. The sort of standard every year items.
Now, have we made an effort to re-examine our timeframes for replacing equipment and vehicles?
So I think, it's something that gets fine tuned.
Okay,
And for example, the fire engine replacement schedule,
yeah,
has been fine tuned the last year, and this assumes that schedule is going forward.
but you know, I would think with the police vehicles going to electric, that would extend out the replacement frequency. And I don't know where we are on patrol cars for electric.
Yeah, they're not there yet.
Okay,
We do have the hybrids now, but
okay,
for the frontline patrol cars, they're not there yet for full electric. They should be in another couple of years.
Did we buy a full electric?
We have 2 full electric as admin cars.
Okay. All right,
It must have been fine.
There are police departments in other cities that have
Yes.
done those frontline vehicles, so do we understand the difference, I think, between what we're looking for and what they seem satisfied with?
I don't have a good sense of that yet.
Okay. Especially out west, you know, in the western part of the country, that is more about ability or willingness to go that route.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I had a question. I know at the last DPW meeting, Chuck was explaining how like on the town warrant, we won't have Tappan Street reconstruction specifically, we'll have it under that 4.5 million would go under road resurfacing, drainage and sidewalk, and like pipe replacement, or all the things that wind into it. It would go under that so that he can have more flexibility. So is the extra 450 for road resurfacing, is that a contingency in addition to?
Those are separate, so the Tappan would be a standalone, right? So that as a $4.5 million all-in project. Both water and sewer pipe replacements, drainage
Right.
upgrades, and repaving.
Would be an item on the specific item on the warrant, or it would just, he was saying that it would go under the generic items, even though that's what it's for.
We wouldn't itemize out the pipes versus the drainage versus the paving. It would just be 4.5 million bond request for that project.
but it seems to me that on the larger DPW projects, just like any other project, that they should be identified separately and have the money allocated to them separately.
Right, so that does this.
So it wouldn't be added in like he's talking about. It would be a separate,
It's separate.
yeah. So the Tappan Street reconstruction would be a separate item on the warrant.
As a bond, it would have to be a separate item.
Okay,
But yes,
Peter,
but I
was
think
I-
there's a different thing we're driving at here, which is the specificity. This is what Dean and I
We're-
listened to
we're-
very carefully. It is how much specificity there is behind the money allocation. There's a lot of lack of specificity currently, which we
Right.
may desire, but
no,
but bear me out.
Yeah.
Which is, the question is, how much specificity? There are extremes here, ladies and
Sure.
gentlemen. But that is a important planning issue in the implementation. As Dean pointed out, the specificity now is fairly general and allows for, therefore, monies that turn out to be available under that general project to be used in the example of Pleasant to do Walker. But it can be applied within the same language. Now, that's something we want or not.
it's misleading to the taxpayers. And I think with the larger projects, they should be identified separately, just like all the other large projects are. And if they have excess money, it goes back. That you don't use it for other things. Because the money was approved for Pleasant Street in a year when it wasn't used for Pleasant Street. It was used for Walker Road instead. And I just think that for the I'm not talking about the little stuff. I'm talking about the large projects that I think they need to be identified separately. And the money has to go for that project, and therefore they have to fine tune the calculation on the request as to what money they really need for that project. Because right now, there's no incentive to fine tune a calculation, because they know if they overstate it, they're just gonna use it for something else instead of losing it. That's where I'm coming from on.
I know that's where you're
Yeah.
coming from.
Sarah,
The
do you-
question is one of management. And the question is, how tight do you want to
Well,
oversight?
we force that on every other department.
And Chuck has his hand up too, that'll be good.
Chuck?
Yeah, so I guess, I can expand on this a little bit. I think Dean and Peter, thank you. They kind of hit it where I was going with it is, I don't mind if you have a $4.5 million appropriation for Tappan Street to put it towards Tappan Street. My problem is that in the implementation, if it comes in at 4.6, what do I do? And the answer is, so far, the way I've been able to accommodate these issues is to have a generic road maintenance line or a drainage and sidewalk line. And so if I need $100,000 extra in this, in this situation to finish the sidewalk, then I ought to have that money available. And so I think that
You have it
yeah,
available lines.
yes, and so that's what so it's a little of column A and a little of column B, like Peter just said. It's there needs to be a understanding that it takes a lot of things to go right to get these projects done. School Street is my go-to example right now, because that was a probably $3 to $4-ish million project, but you will not see a $3 or $4 million appropriation for School Street in any of our previous budgets, because I handled it on a looking forward year, 2 years, 3 years out, and I was able to accumulate the appropriate amount of Chapter 90 funds and pipeline work funds and roadway funds and all of that stuff. So if there had been a $3 million or $4 million School Street appropriation, I would have still needed those other generic lines to make sure that the entire project came done, because we will hear it the other way. If I go back to town meeting 5 times for School Street, that doesn't look very good, and it doesn't instill confidence in the work we're doing. But I will tell you very much, there is an incentive for me to keep these projects on schedule and on budget, and I work very hard to do that. And so I hope that we all appreciate that it does take a lot of work to get that done. And I don't get to keep the money. It goes right back into the next roadway or the next sidewalk or the next pipeline or so on. So that is my incentive to keep these going. And if we came in at Tappan Street at 4 million, in a scenario where that's all generic lines, and I had $500,000 left, that would go right into Bennett Street the following year. I don't keep it. I don't care if there's a $4.5 million appropriation for Tappan Street. I just need to, make sure everyone's aware, and we're very open and transparent about that. I'm not trying to hide anything. It's just, this is the reality of getting these types of projects done. And I think we have a track record now that these projects do get done, and they get done on time, and they get done on budget. And same thing happened with Walker Road and Pleasant Street. I didn't go back for an additional, $5 million or whatever for Pleasant Street. I used a certain amount of money to get Walker Road done because it was a need. And I went back for the appropriate amount of Pleasant Street funds to get that job done as you see it constructed now. We also were looking at other alternatives for, other road space in Pleasant Street, as you all know, for if we needed to send PFAS or, Lincoln Street well water up to Gravelly Pond. So there's a lot of moving parts that I need to be able to, pull from these buckets and everything, but there needs to be a certain amount of discretion to get them done. And that is the bottom line. And if we go the other way, I'm afraid that it won't work as well.
I'm not disagreeing with that, Chuck, but the philosophy of the finance committee is to tax the taxpayers for current expenses. And it's not to put a number out there and say, okay, I'm gonna tax the taxpayers this year, and if I have $500,000 left extra, I'm gonna use it next year. Or I'm gonna save up money for 3 years to put it against a project, because that just goes contrary to what our philosophy is, and for every time we build a building, there's a specific amount. And I think for the larger DPW projects, there could be a specific amount.
Well, we get unit price items for all of this work. So like in the other example right now for Pleasant Street, we designed additional work for Pleasant Street Extension and for Old Essex Road. So like that work is now included in that appropriation, but I was never specific to, if we'd be, it's all comes down to the bid climate at the time. The numbers for the budget are just the budget. There's a whole level that comes after the budget. So I appreciate that that's your, approach, but like that's not reality. Like reality is that we need the money available when I need to spend it. And we need to have the money available at the beginning of the job to sign the contracts. So like, I get what you're saying, but like, that's just not the reality. I'm happy to give you the budget of 4.5 million or whatever the project is, but that's not necessarily how it's going to be executed. And I think it's worked so far. And like I said, if you want to call it a threshold that we go above, it certainly, it makes sense, I guess, if there's a bond. But if the bond is not enough, I will need those other discretionary funds to pay for the work.
Okay, thank you, John.
I had a question.
Kathy,
Yes, I had a question. So Sarah, you mentioned the larger DPW projects. Did you have a dollar threshold in mind? What might come, because I agree with the philosophy of the FinCom. It's been,
Right.
how we ran things in private sector. So, but usually we had some sort of a dollar threshold or duration in mind that we could clearly say, okay, these types of projects need that clarity, that definition.
I think we would need information on what specific projects have cost,
Okay.
what the numbers are around that in order to make that.
I think that
decision.
might help with the discussion
Right.
though, if you had,
Right.
So if I could chime in, because I think the way that Chuck, I recognize that Chuck is doing what he needs to do to kind of advance the work that needs to happen in town. And there is a lot of fluidity in the construction market relative to pricing. In the bid market at any given time can vary. And maybe, and I'd like to continue to get, I understand and respect the policy, but I'd like to be able to give him the flexibility to do his job as he advises us he needs to do it. If there's ways we can come up with, being a little bit more upfront with the taxpayers, maybe a project gets identified as Pleasant Street, and here are 2 other contingent uses.
Yep.
Kind of an approach. And maybe also sharing with them, hey, this is our best guess at what the value of this work might be. But this could be plus or minus 20%. And so in order to accommodate that, if it goes plus 20%, we have this other chapter 90 money saved. Maybe we report that chapter 90 savings or any other sort of accrued money on a year-to-year basis.
May I just comment on that? So at the federal level, the way that's done for really large $1 billion projects is you have a risk and opportunity register. And when you're planning a project, you outline the risks and opportunities, you dollarize it,
Yep.
and you use that bottom line figure to develop your contingency budget for that particular project. That way the money stays clear and delineates one project from another, yet you're still transparent about any high risk items or things that could go over a traditional budget. So you don't peanut butter spread, 10% contingency, 5%
Yep.
contingency. You figure out based on a risk register.
Okay, I think we beat this into the ground.
So Sarah, I do have a question.
Yeah,
It probably just diving into the question about, are we front loading this capital plan or how is it going? And I'm just looking at fiscal year 26. And the largest capital requests are, of course, with DPW. And that's the building and Tappan Street reconstruction, but that comes in at about almost 7.5 million in the next year, the budget year we're gonna be talking about very, very shortly. The next biggest item on this list is the harbor. And I'm wondering how much of this is current or can be defrayed, but that's numbers like 6 million.
Let's put that off until we actually talk about capital.
Okay.
Then
Let's not get into the weeds tonight.
Well, the only reason I ask is that when you add this year up, we're talking about 11.
Right.
And when you look at the overall plan, if you're bonding to start in fiscal 26 at 11 as opposed to 8 or 6
So-
or something, that's just what I'm asking about here.
Yeah, the total request for 26 came in at just over 20 million.
Right.
Look at the
Yeah.
next
But
column.
look at the next
But
column.
I'm recommending just under
Right.
4 million. And
So they've taken
2.1 of
off,
that is from taxation and fund balance.
so they've taken off the Sweeney turf field.
So the big thing in the harbor is a boat. Do we need a boat?
But the
Repark
Repark.
park.
you know, that's all grant funded down the road. So I just took that out completely. And the dredging, you know, again, I deferred that until 27 and a third of that comes through grants.
Can I just ask, what is the Tappan Street project?
It's basically a replacement of all pipes, meaning stormwater, water and sewer, and the reconstruction of the roadway.
And what's the ballpark cost?
You know, 4.5 million.
4 to 4.5 million. And when are we thinking of doing that?
So I'm showing that being bonded in 27.
So that's 3 years out, roughly?
Oh,
No, two
years.
fiscal years out.
Two fiscal.
3 fiscal, how many calendar? 2? Or the other way around?
Our fiscal years are like halfway into the current year, so we're currently in fiscal year 25 right now,
Correct.
but we haven't gotten to calendar year 25 yet. So
So fiscal 25 we're in, we're saying Tappan Street is fiscal 27, so basically 2 years?
right,
Oh, we'll be planning fiscal year 27 a year from now.
Yeah, a year from now, we'll be talking about it.
12
Yeah.
months from now, we'll be talking about it.
Time accelerates.
well, and I thought that you started projects before you paid for the bonds.
Typically do. We need the
Okay.
bond authorization.
Okay, but we don't pay for them.
Right.
So that those percentage tax increases are misleading,
So, again,
right?
there's some fine tuning that can happen.
Yeah.
It's a
We
good start. It's a good
can
start.
stretch those out and
So in order to put a project out to bid, we have to have authorized the bond,
Right.
but they don't actually issue the bond until they're into the project.
Right.
And that's when we
Not till it's
start-
completed.
till they
You do
complete-
bond- You need to do bond anticipation notes.
Right.
And that's when we pay from our taxes, is when they actually issue the bonds, not when they do the project.
So help me out here. So I'm just thinking of the school as an example. We do an override and both towns vote on it. And our tax rate goes up
2 years
before the,
later.
before the
Yes.
project.
No,
Okay,
Yeah, 2 years later typically.
can we stretch that out? I mean, what's the band? So can you get authorization for a bond to get going on a project, but then actually bill the taxpayers like 5 years out, or is that too far?
I think you can. I'll have to double check how if there's a limit on the years you can push it out. You're just incurring more interest because your bands you're paying just interest, you're not paying any principal.
Right.
So you'll incur more interest, but you're delaying the payment.
Right. Yeah, it's just kind of working to what you're talking about, which is how do you give this team more flexibility? Don't reach at the taxpayer quite as early.
Right, so again, that's the kind of different scenarios you can look at. Going back to that bonding spreadsheet.
Costs you something to do that, which is the interest. That's charged too.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so are we good on this?
Thank you.
We obviously want to spend some time each looking
Yeah,
at it.
so again, there's a lot of information, a lot of assumptions. Kick the tires pretty hard on this one. And, when we meet again, we can, dive that much deeper.
Have the selectmen looked at this? Are they
Yeah,
getting?
they'll get their first look on Monday.
And what's likely to be our next step in this discussion? Sarah?
Well, what do you feel we need to do?
We need to begin to together the selection, decide on how we're gonna put this together and the priority of the items. Because the priority is it's all about the priority of the items, and
Right, and what information do we need in order to prioritize the items? That's the
I think
question.
that's the discussion.
I think so, and input from the select board after they have an opportunity to hear it. Good.
Feedback from voters. It would seem like finance and board and selectmen should focus on a 5-year plan. With a fair amount of intensity.
Yes.
And then a 10-year plan with some degree of flexibility. And then we should look at Greg's 25-year plan and not go, holy crap, we didn't expect this, And that's kind of the world.
I agree with you on that, Maureen. I'm just saying, I think that 5-year is a discussion with the selectmen, once they have a chance to look at it with the intensity you're talking about. Because I think it means setting the priorities of the various pieces here.
Okay. So we're through with long-term capital plan for tonight, right?
Right.
Okay. The next is the review of the MBTA Communities Act fiscal analysis, which I apologize, I sent out very late because it was very late before it was completed. And recalculated. As I looked at the numbers, I said, something's not right. And I had erroneously done calculations at full build out based on 224 instead of 324 units. Looks like I didn't fix the typo in one of them, yeah. So as I was doing this, my thought process was, because there's so much contention around that RKG report and whether 34 units is reasonable and all that, I thought, well, it makes sense to do the numbers based on that. And also the worst case scenario of full build out. So that people can't complain, say we were cherry picking. That's kind of where I was coming from, but as I look at it, when you talk about the full build out of 324 units, it seems to me it probably makes more sense that would be over 20 years, not 10.
Oh, so your question on that was to apply a 20 as to all numbers? In other words, the full build out, you just said or the larger number of units only for the 20 and the smaller, the 134 for 10? I'm just confused over which numbers do you want to apply?
We can do it either way. But it's certainly 134 versus 324, you're not gonna have built in the same time frame.
Right, I thought your question was a good one, and I thought
Yeah.
it should apply only to the 324, that is.
Okay, and that was kind of where my mindset was
I
coming
agree
from.
with you, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I like the approach of showing the two scenarios, like, I think that's a good thing, but I think that these units could get built a lot quicker than people think, because, you know, we're trying to compare it to the way things have gone, and sure, right, historically, you know, I don't even know the numbers. I'm sure, Sarah, you know how many, you know, additional units per year, but it's kind of apples to oranges, because it hasn't been able to be done just by right? It's been, you know, permits and ZBA and da da da. So it's a different world. So I think they could get built a lot quicker.
I think the other thing, Mike, is when you're talking construction and all the stuff I'm looking around, you don't even complete something for 2 years after you've purchased the land. So you're really talking about the first units probably won't come on for 2 years. And so that's kind of why I think it does spread out a lot, because, you know, you either, you know, you might have to acquire the property that takes a while, or if you have the just everything seems to take forever to build.
I mean, how long, I think someone on the committee actually lives on Blyman Circle, right? But how long did that take? I didn't think it took that long. And that's what, like 8 houses, 10 houses?
Sunset, where you live, do you know how long the construction process was?
Being for the Blyman Circle?
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
10 years.
10 years.
10 years.
The house was done in 16. And I think they started by the discussions on acquiring the land in 6. Now, how long the planning board took, I can't give you specifics.
Yeah, I'm talking more just actual, I understand that land had a lot of permits and all that kind. I'm talking from when that was all settled, like when they started digging foundations to, you know, selling the homes. But anyways, I just think when money's at stake and a profit is to be made, you know, I think things can get done quickly.
I don't know how long Sawmill Circle took.
And Mike, are you asking for when they started building houses or when they started acquiring the land?
Yeah, I'm talking from when they put the first backhoe in the ground to dig a foundation to when they had it for sales.
I think that was about 7 years. If I look at the permits that apply, look at the dates on when the discussion started, I think it's more like 7. It's 10 when you're talking about buying the land at that level.
Yeah.
So are there any comments on this? Would you like more time to look at it and send me comments?
Yeah.
I haven't really read it.
Okay.
I'm afraid I'm not gonna be effective. How much pressure are you under to get this to them? Yes, that's the question.
So the public hearing is on October 28th. And meeting packets are done on October 24th. So I would say I need to get this done by Monday or Tuesday of next week.
So if we send you one of our comments.
Yeah,
We'll just send you comments.
yeah, just send me comments, yeah.
Usually like the 22nd or 23rd or something like that.
21st and 23rd,
21st.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sarah, while this is all fresh in your mind.
Yeah.
The potential loss of grants, can you tell us
Yes.
how you calculated that, what the logic was there? You do it as a percentage of town activity, or did you do it
The
specifically like
ta-
bottom up?
The task force had done calculations which were assuming an average of 1.8 million over the next 3 years. So I rounded down to 1 to 2 million, and then I also listed under the grant section, the potential areas where we could receive grants. I think that the concern with grants is people want to look at history a lot.
Mhm.
And I think and of course, in 2024 was 4 million, but 3.5 million of that was for water and sewer enhancements for LCD. So that was unusual. However, I think that as we have more capital infrastructure projects, more climate resiliency, and the state has put aside 300 million, I think, out of some fund to use as matching grants to secure more federal monies. And if they get the federal grants, then they allocate them out at the state level. So they're not federal grants anymore.
So there's no need for a local match. The local match is covered by the state.
State,
Yeah.
right, okay.
So, there seems to be, I think this 1 to 2 million a year is probably low. I think there's much more opportunity for grants, but I wanted to be
Right,
conservative, and I think that the town has increased its grants recently because we hired somebody to do grants.
Right.
I mean, so they're paying more attention, and we don't know what the number is.
I mean, I was just kind of going to the total other end of the extreme from our conversation a few minutes ago about, 225 million over 25 years. Divide that annually and say, okay, what's the percentage there? And again, percentage is all over the map, but it probably would come in a little more than 1 million or 2, but I don't know.
I certainly can add into the verbiage that there's 224 million of infrastructure.
I mean, if that's our
Infrastructure
25-year kind
needed,
of run
you know.
plan,
I think it's very dangerous to speculate on what might happen, I mean, like, I agree with the point that if you look at history, it's lumpy, and so to try to like do a regression and say, what is history gonna do going forward, that's risky, but I think it's more risky to just speculate and say, we think that this is gonna happen in the next 3 years. I mean, I don't like speculating on interest rates or stock market or like, because who knows? I mean, so maybe the better approach is like you said on the number of units, and you position it as bookends, and you say, it could come in at this, but it could come in at this, right? So it could come in at 0 and it could come in at 2, 3, 4. I don't, whatever. I mean,
So in the last 10, 12 years, you've had a grand total of about $22 million worth of grants. Now, of that 22 million, 5 plus are very definitively labeled as grants that could have been withheld under the 3 original grant sources that the law states. The challenge we have here is that list has expanded, and we don't know what's going to happen going forward. That may be one area where the court sort of reins in the state a bit. If they're going to do any reining in under the Milton decision, they may say, look, the law said these 3 and no more. You can't do more than that. I don't know. Again, we're
Well,
speculating.
and I disagree with that to some extent, because I think that grants that the state gives out are discretionary. And they have a whole bunch of criteria. And I don't see why they can't have one of the criteria that they look at is, did you comply? It wouldn't be a reason to deny it. It would just be a factor in determining
Scoring system.
under a competitive grant of determining whether you qualify. But it's not a denial, which is different than the legislation says you can take these grants away. But I also think that they can use their muscle to say, okay, we're gonna take that into consideration. But we don't know.
And for example, they just announced last week or maybe week and a half ago, new grants that are incentive grants. So for those of you who have complied, you can apply for these infrastructure monies. But it's specifically targeted to folks who have complied.
People that
Right.
play ball.
So it's a moving target.
Yeah.
the only thing that's certain is
Apparently, for
nobody.
some of the towns, they're issuing grants and saying these are conditioned upon compliance.
Right, so the
That's good.
library grant that we just
That
applied
was,
for,
yeah,
they're waiting to announce the decision. They delayed the announcement pending the December 31st deadline.
So Sarah, just a very specific comment along these
Yeah.
lines. In the grants area, the second paragraph, that closing sentence, these could add up to millions of dollars. I think goes in the right direction, but it's too weak.
so I'll change that to 224 million. Or say we have 224 million of infrastructure,
Yeah, I would go to where Maury was a few minutes ago, which is to put into more detail, because it's just. We have two things going on, a changing circumstance, which I think is the resiliency issue. And I think part of this paragraph is trying to predict the future, which I know can't be predicted.
Right, yeah,
But it just seems too
okay,
soft.
okay, yep,
Right.
Well, I was under the impression it was state grants from the state budget. But what Sarah is saying, it might influence federal grants as well.
if it's
yeah.
flow through the state,
That's quite a
Yes.
way, yeah.
because the state has full discretion on who they give it to. Which is, and there's tons of grants that are that way.
Yes, that will.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what you're trying to get at
Right.
here.
Yeah,
and we-
okay.
We need to say it just a little more forcefully, I think.
Okay,
We should be careful about the figure that we throw out there.
I'm not asking about
I
figures, I'm
would
just
like to
saying tone.
research
Yeah,
what
yeah.
this is.
The key is what-
Right.
We don't know what the worst case, best case is.
I mean, could I say that this could add to millions of dollars, particularly given the fact that we've got over $200 million worth of infrastructure, future infrastructure projects?
Yes.
Planned for the future.
Overcoming,
Yes,
Next 30 years.
okay,
yeah, next 30 years.
That would have a bigger impact.
Could you also say, and resiliency is becoming a brand new topic of concern?
yep,
I don't know if you want to go this far, but there seems like there's three things that are really driving our capital plan: resiliency, water quality, or water delivery, and then infrastructure buildings. And it's a little hard to duck from any of those,
yep,
but those are the drivers. So people aren't thinking, oh, they just want to buy a lot of fire trucks. That's not.
And of course, buildings include schools. I mean, I don't want people to forget that we've got school renovations and other things that come into play here.
right, okay.
When can we expect some result from the Essex Elementary study? Like, that was gonna determine how fast Essex was gonna go as well.
It's not the feasibility study.
Yeah,
So that's probably gonna be a year-long or so process to get to the point of understanding what the project budget would be,
Yeah.
that then goes before town meeting in each town.
yeah, so there's
That would
not
be a year
much of a
from
chance
now,
of that happening. in
Roughly,
26.
You know, I would think that I would think, I mean, there's a lot to be done. It's a small project though, relatively speaking.
yeah, right.
Look at Lexington High School.
Yeah, right,
But it's, usually these things present at like a November town meeting, for a vote. It's possible it could run through to the next spring, but I would say sometime in the next
Year and a half.
12 to 18 months. Yeah.
Just to be clear on this, so comments to you by Monday?
yep, that would be
Okay.
great,
That'd be great.
yep. And if I have concerns over any of the comments, I will talk to people
Okay.
to see where they're coming from on their comments. Summary of the select board fiscal year 26 priorities.
Hmm.
Do we have a to-do list from that?
From last week,
Yeah,
I don't think anything specific came out of it.
okay,
It's more just kind of a hearing of what we had talked about.
okay,
A little more high level.
Well, this item
I
is
know,
particularly valuable to me because I wasn't there.
neither was I,
Oh, okay, so I mean, anything you can offer,
but it will be in the minutes,
okay, well,
right?
fine. I
So
wanted to,
it was an affirmation of the long-range capital planning being a high priority.
okay,
There's pretty much agreement across the board on that.
Yep.
I think Maureen and Andy both spoke to some of the challenges of making that a definitive plan that, that's in stone, which it isn't, so there's always that challenge.
That's been play.
Right, that's in play.
I don't
Or
recall-
quicksand.
I don't recall there was any discussion about priorities, though, specifics.
No,
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 Well, they did mention the big three and the DPW wasn't, so that does have support. So it was Essex Elementary, PFAS and DPW were the big three that they were talking about, I believe.
right, well, and we kind of summarized that, our focus tends to be on DPW,
Big three.
police and fire.
Right.
Yeah.
We also sort of said that a lot of times we start a process of evaluating things, but we don't know what the political winds. And I think encourage the selectmen to try and ferret that out a little more or better or whatever. Maybe there's no answer to that, but we can charge down all these models and scenarios all we want, but at the end of the day, if people throw up their hands about a DPW building, that's where it goes.
No, I think that's very real.
And then the only other thing was, and I know I beat this horse dead, but if we get revenue on the same expense page in the book, we're flipping forward and back a lot. So.
Do I need to meet with Andrea to go through the budget book, or do you think she's pretty well set in understanding what people are looking for?
that'd probably be helpful. Just for
Okay.
that.
Okay,
Um,
to find out what's doable and what isn't.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Okay, next is liaison updates.
Well, I think you heard just part of the DPW by
Yep.
both Dean's and my comments.
Okay.
That was a very central, that discussion you had and so forth with Chuck. I think the other one has been also hidden in Maury's comments about trying to be clear about what is the priority here. Because there can be a lot of time spent looking at things which turn out to be lower priorities. So that was a sort of another theme of that discussion. I know you are looking for, at least I read you as looking for the process, issues about process. And I think two things struck me, and there may be different ones for Dean, but one is the number of bidders on any one project is very small. A. B, they're very repeated. So we're not dealing with a wide range of those capabilities that are interested in working with our town in its requirements. So that struck me. I think the other item was that when we get the bids, we really have an idea of what the bid should be. It's $500 for pipes and tar per X unit of footage. I mean, we have a target in mind that is fairly well known to us, given the number of projects we're dealing with. So we go at it with that understanding and looking at whatever the bid comes back. That should be no surprise to anybody here, given the professionalism of the DPW. I guess the one thing that struck me was the next step, which is, I think the increased professionalism as we go along of the DPW is an important priority in general. And I think as we're faced with more water requirements, we need to be prepared to understand that the professional level of people who run all this equipment is probably got to go up. As we think of the staffing changes, that came up in the discussion about some of the things. They're not necessarily this is an operating comment. In terms of the type of personnel and their background is going to become ever more, I'm going to say probably specialized and potentially expensive, but that's my assumptions.
And that's, for example, relevant to the water department? where
Yes,
we saw-
particularly for the water department.
So is that any kind of commentary on the current vendor?
Well, I think that's a PFAS. We start talking about
Yeah.
copper being one of the new measurement points or potentially,
But he
but
did,
very true, very much in the water department. Not that that's directly what I think your question was, Sarah, for us to talk about, but it's a sidelight in it.
well, one
Dean,
of the
what
growths
were your
was,
takeaways, Dean?
we were close to, in the water, if we grow much more, the guidelines are, instead of having 2 full-time equivalents, we were gonna need a third.
Right.
So there might be another facility guy down the road because of additional water. That was the one of the, because we were asking about the DPW costs associated with the development, because we knew we were gonna finalize this. And, you know, he really felt like the sidewalk improvements and any intersection stuff would be put on the developer. Whether that's happened to date or not, I don't know, but I'm comfortable with the numbers that you used in the letter.
That's where we came out.
Okay.
Yeah, he didn't
I
really
mean,
have
there's
a
more
lot
to
of
be
big.
discussed, but that's where we came out in the 2 conversations we had.
Okay. Any other liaison updates?
Mike and I need to get.
Well, yeah, we approved the Long Hill stuff with CPC. That was.
Well, Annie and I had a chance to meet with the chief.
Okay,
I left my notepad at home and he took all the notes, but,
he's pulling out his
He's pulling out-
tablet.
um.
I just have to read my writing.
But, you know, from memory, I mean, there's some little news, I mean, not little news, but the call firefighters are working out well. He's
Great.
happy with that integration.
Good.
Um,
Such a relief.
very, feel very strongly that the grant will pay for the CBA units.
Good.
So that's a good,
What units?
the scuba unit, the breathing units,
Breathing
and I think the
units.
fill station too, if I'm not mistaken. The big ticket items are, you know, refunding the fire truck, which I saw in one of these, the $300,000 a year.
Oh,
The
yes.
re-
the-
Oh,
the fund,
refill
the
that
fund,
kitty,
yes,
Yeah.
refunding,
Cause that got
okay.
depleted. with the
Refilling.
truck.
Yeah,
Gotta get ready for the pump.
Yep, so just express some concerns about that, but it appears to be a line item there. What am I missing? Oh, staffing. Talked a little bit about the new OSHA requirements. We are gonna be held to compliance for that. So future staffing, I think the chief is concerned about getting a deputy on board at some point.
what's the new OSHA requirement?
So it requires 4 personnel on site.
Oh, we're back, okay, I mean, so, yeah, it's now becoming a requirement.
Yeah. Yeah.
And OSHA,
Driven by OSHA.
yeah. So it's employee safety.
He also mentioned that the SAFA grant could offset the cost of the SCBA.
We know in the safer grants.
Which is, you know, and that year he estimated was 250,000.
Oh, wow, expensive.
Boy, it seems like we could encourage our police to maybe be volunteer firefighters as well. To help that 4 in.
Now, there was some discussion too about the fire vehicle replacement. And maybe your notes will come in handy here, but the chief felt that we could order it now, but not be on the hook for it at some point.
Yes, he had spoken to, I think, one of the vendors, and there was an opportunity for us to get a later model but new engine that was
Today's dollars.
preceded the emissions upgrades that are now required on those rigs, which A, add to the cost, and B, reduce the reliability of them.
So are we changing the vehicle replacement schedule?
No, because there's a 2+ year lead time.
Yeah.
So what he would be seeking is permission to place the order now.
And it can be,
Contingent
yeah,
subsequent funding appropriation. And the vendor indicated his willingness to sign that contract because he can always turn around and sell it if we.
To somebody else?
As long as it doesn't have any kind of weird bells and
Yes,
whistles.
as long as it's
Yeah.
not too specialized.
so he said that they could, you know, sign a contingent deal that's pending appropriation. the reserve.
which haven't been able to do in the past.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
With the intent that the actual purchase, gentlemen, would be how many years out?
At least 2 years out.
I think that's the build cycles.
I didn't know if you were gonna say longer, that's actually why I asked.
It'd actually be 3 town meeting votes.
Okay. So it's actually, yeah.
But
I think those are the
It'd be
highlights.
purchased at the beginning
Yeah,
of that. third.
otherwise, they're still borrowing the Linfield engine.
And is that gonna continue
Until they ask
indefinitely?
for it
Well,
back.
our engine's working, isn't it?
Got a coolant leak at the moment.
Because I see it around town.
It's a fingers crossed, the way the chief says it, fingers crossed it'll start when you get it.
Otherwise, we got a tour of the new ladder truck.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
Very pretty.
It's quite a, it is the Leatherman of fire trucks.
It's doing everything.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
They have it on the street a lot.
Yeah, well, they've been exercising and they've been taking it, because it's got ALS, so they've been taking it on some calls with the
Yeah.
ambulance.
All I can think with ALS is a disease,
And-
but.
And they were,
Advanced life.
Thank you, thank you. Sorry, I thought it had ALS and I
It could
thought
be similar
machinery
to
doesn't
some
get
point.
ALS
when
as
they
far
were
as I
playing
know.
with the ladder behind the American Legion, I think they were training on it or something.
So I think that's the highlights.
Pretty good for no notes, Tom.
No ALS here.
Yes, well,
For notes that Andy said he can't read. Okay,
okay.
Now, do you have any issues with the town budget that you need to discuss in advance? Just so you're stuck with me.
In terms of the current year budget?
Fiscal 25,
Yeah.
yeah. There's nothing unusual.
There's nothing.
Okay, okay.
Of major concern yet.
Okay. Budget preparation schedule.
Hmm.
So. You're meeting with departments still, right?
Yeah, so there.
We haven't started
We
maybe.
haven't started those formal meetings. They're getting underway with their operating budgets now.
Okay,
With the intent that they will conclude in early
Early
December.
November
No,
to me, and then we sit down and do the fine tuning.
okay, so from our point of view, it's a early December.
Yes.
Yeah.
so, yeah, according to my notes, which I can't read either, Andy.
Misery loves company.
We have a meeting scheduled for October 30th. We have one for November 21st. And the Essex FinCom has made the suggestion they might like to meet jointly with us.
And that's over and above the 21st, that's another meeting.
No, that would be the meeting on the
That's the meeting.
21st. Because they wanted a Thursday and that's a Thursday where we're meeting. So I suggested, I haven't received confirmation, but I suggested that November 21st would be a good day. And then we have a December 4th and a December 16th meeting. 16th, I think, is for joint with select board for present the budget.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Okay,
It's number 16.
so do we have anything regarding the budget to do on October 30th? Greg,
Well, I think more capital.
more capital, okay,
I think the focus should be on capital.
okay.
When's the joint meeting?
Current year.
16?
26-year
12,
capital or
16.
longer,
No,
longer.
Okay. What are you asking, Andy?
When the joint meeting was, because I had.
Monday, December 16th with the select board.
Right, because I had something on our calendars for the 18th. Is that, I don't know if that was wrong.
I think we had issues with the 18th.
What day of the week is the 18th of December?
Yes, I had an issue with the 18th because that's CBA.
60,000.
Yeah. Okay, so it's 10:30. I mistyped it on the agenda. It's 10:30. Would be capital. Okay.
And Andy, is that entry on your calendar of 12/18 relevant, or is that a
I just deleted it.
mistake?
Sarah said I could.
Yeah. Okay. So we're good on budget scheduling?
Yep.
Okay. I don't, okay, so the next is the special town meeting warrant articles. It's in your email. I printed out and left at home.
Do I have these? I don't feel like.
You don't have the official articles. I gave you a
He
summary.
gave us an email
in The email.
Okay,
I had the spreadsheets, the capital spreadsheets.
yesterday.
okay, thank you.
Zoning amendments to comply with the new MBTA 3A requirements. I have the email.
Yeah, I'm looking at it too.
Okay.
And so we will have that fiscal analysis and I plan to speak
Uh-huh.
on that article.
So, do you as a committee want to take a stance on recommending one way or the other on
I think we should be.
The MBTA.
I mean, because it has financial consequences.
Yeah.
Do we have to vote on it tonight?
you don't have to, but then you need to meet prior to the 30th, because I need.
I have budget sections.
I need to put the warrant with your recommendations.
Is it in this one?
Has to go to the printer
Oh,
Okay.
got it right here.
Yep.
Right here.
Okay,
on the 30th in the
Thanks.
morning.
Let's put it on
I
town.
got it.
okay. So,
That should be the 30th.
okay. So we need to make a recommendation with respect to the zoning amendments to comply with the new MBTA 3A requirements.
Isn't our written advice really it's based on the facts? Am I missing something here?
No, every
Is it the
warrant article that has financial implications, we have to make a recommendation of yes or no. We recommend or we do not recommend.
What we recommend on the floor. Okay.
I understand all of it. What you're writing and getting comments on is the heart of that it's a financial recommendation. And
It's,
am I missing something here? It's financially, this is a big
Right.
state that we get more grants, I mean, than this costs us.
right,
Therefore,
Yeah, but hold on. So there's different subjective inputs and you could put in different subjective inputs and come out with a different conclusion. So that's part of the issue.
Mike, I'm not, say it again, please, Mike. I didn't follow that.
There's a lot of unknowns, right? Like, in other words, you know, do you use the 350 units or do you use the 130 or do you use 0 or do you assume 0.26 new students per unit or do you assume 0.75 or 0.5? Like there's a ton of different variables, subjective inputs, and depending upon which ones you use, you come to a different conclusion.
Therefore,
well, so I think that. we
Therefore,
need-
it's not cut and dry, is all I'm trying to say.
oh, okay. I'm sorry, I thought that led you to a certain recommendation or non-recommendation.
Well, every individual obviously does their own subjective inputs and comes to their own conclusion, but there's no like hard black and white, you know, facts. I mean, in terms of a conclusion.
So
So are you looking for a recommendation, a
I'm-
second?
I'm looking for a motion
To do what?
to recommend the warrant article on the zoning amendments to comply with the MBTA Communities Act. We
Second.
recommend it. Okay, I make that motion. You're gonna second it.
I'm gonna second that.
Any discussion?
Well, what set of given what Mike just said, that's why I asked him to repeat it. What set of assumptions would you like us to to be considering, given the fact that there's a wide range of assumptions. All.
Well,
of
we've
which-
done this financial analysis,
Yes, I understand that,
okay?
yes.
So the question is does the finance committee recommend
Meaning.
that these
this
zoning
is-
amendments be passed?
That we-
Meaning-
the zoning.
Does it, do we want to protect our eligibility for state grants? Is this something that is, we should do in order to protect that eligibility?
That's one element.
That's another, that's a sidecar to the memo that,
But it's a core comment.
what's that?
It's not just a side comment, it's a core comment. I mean,
From the finance committee, is
I'm
it
the
financially
But it's
feasible?
not part of the specific financial analysis that was
Sure.
done. It matters. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. I'm just saying it wasn't in the financial analysis that we did specifically. We didn't try to capture that money.
well, you tried to capture. the
Well,
amount
we
of
say
grants.
there's a potential loss of
Yeah,
grants.
yeah, yeah,
And-
that's all I mean, Peter.
When we say that, we're saying that under the 134 unit scenario build out based on the assumptions made, that there's a cost to the town of 38,000 over the full year of the build out. For 324 units, we're saying that there is a benefit to the town of 189,000. When we look at the 10-year, over 10 years for the 134 units, we're saying it will cost the town $3,800. And over the full build out at 324 over 10 years, but we're gonna change it to 20. It would be a benefit to the town of 18,900. And then there's a potential that if we don't pass it, we could lose grants, or presumably more than those dollar amounts.
Oh,
Yeah.
So I think one way to think about this is we all have our personal views about things.
Right.
But we're on this committee because we're supposed to look at things through a financial lens. And that's what we do. And sometimes I personally sometimes vote for things from a financial point of view that aren't lined up with my personal views, but that's why we get paid the big bucks to be here. Okay? So,
And that's what the recommendation is. It's our committee's
Right.
recommendation
Yeah,
from a financial point of view.
from a financial standpoint only, not our personal opinion.
so the way I look at this financially, very narrowly, and I'm not thinking about affordable housing and all that stuff, is how is the town impacted financially if we do not approve this? And when I think of 1 to 2 million or more or less, I get worried about that. I also get worried if we don't comply and the state comes in and says, okay, Manchester, you didn't comply, but now we're gonna overlay this the way we wanna do it on you. And now our 134 and 324 units looks real different. Like, they may dictate something that we have to comply with, and that gets a whole lot more expensive. So that's a risk, and I'm concerned about that. So when I kind of look at those two things, and then I also kind of reading the tea leaves say, okay, if Manchester passes this at our November meeting, but the state throws it out in January or February, we could hold another town meeting and just unroll this thing. So when I look at those sort of scenarios, personally, I'm like, from a financial point of view, I think I would recommend we support this because it's safe and it's covering ourselves a little bit. And we have a back door we could back out if we needed to. So that's the logic that I look at this from. I have friends who live in Milton and other places, and yeah, I don't like unfunded mandates, and I could stand on the hillside and and fight it off, but that gets really expensive, and I think it potentially is kind of dangerous for this town, so.
My question more is, what's the back out you're talking about? I'm sorry, I don't follow. If the state throws it, the state says, no, we're not gonna do this?
No, if they voted in the Milton case,
Okay, they lose the case.
the outcome of the Milton
I
case
understand.
could
prevails.
change,
Got it. I just want to be sure I
Then
understood
we
what
just
you're
in
saying.
February or January or sometime, just say, we're just gonna unwrap what we did in November.
Yep.
We're gonna undo the zoning changes.
So I don't see a whole heavy risk
No, I don't either.
in.
Yeah.
this, and I think it's safe to recommend it. So that's the way I would.
Well articulated.
You need a second on the motion, or we know, do
We
we?
have a second.
Okay,
We're
we have
in
a
the
motion and a
discussion.
second.
We are in a discussion phase. Great.
So I think your analysis shows that under the lower unit or the higher unit construction, it's pretty much a wash. So there's not a financial harm based on those assumptions, right?
Right.
In either scenario. So then it reverts to what Maureen just, and then sort of feeds into what Maureen just said.
The risk of not complying. Any more discussion?
I'll just, yeah, obviously I'm in the minority, but I'm still gonna speak my piece. I mean, I've run these numbers. And I've come up with an analysis that would show that the town would actually be losing somewhere between 1 and 2 million a year. Now, if you tell me that that offsets 1 to 2 million in grants a year, then I guess it's a wash. But I personally don't think we can expect 1 to 2 million a year in grants from the state. Now, maybe I'm wrong. I guess hopefully I am, but if I go into it from that approach, I think it's a very risky proposition. And in terms of passing it and then just like pulling the 180, if you know the state backs down or whatever, I'm not as confident about that because I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it does require a 2/3 approval, or am I wrong on that?
No, majority.
Just majority both ways, even to undo it?
Correct.
Okay.
Any more discussion?
Well, I know, I know we're looking at it from a financial lens, but we're also kind of representatives of the town. And I know the people I talk to on this, the response has been from, we don't need a train station to, how dare they tell us our zoning? And, that's seems to be like it's more of a philosophical thing that they shouldn't be, forcing this on us.
But what's that have to do with the financial piece?
Well, that we're representatives of the town.
We're
Financial.
making a recommendation on behalf of the finance committee. We're not representing personal opinions of people in town or our own personal opinion. It's merely from a financial standpoint, does it make sense to support the zoning amendment? That's what we're charged with doing for any financial item on the warrant. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's take a vote. Andy,
Yes.
Dean,
No,
Maury,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Mike,
No.
Sarah votes yes. Okay. Next item is CPC funding of 250,000 for the 3 million land conservation deal that we heard about at our last meeting on Long Hill. This is from CPC. So I'll make a motion to support the expenditure of 250,000 in CPC funding for the purpose of a conservation restriction on a portion of the land being purchased by Greenbelt,
oh,
Essex County Greenbelt.
we voted on this last meeting.
We did not vote a recommendation on the warrant article. We voted to support it.
Supported, okay.
This is a recommendation on the
Gotcha.
warrant article.
Okay,
I'll second.
Andy seconds. Any discussion? Take a vote. Andy,
Yes.
Dean,
yes.
Maury,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Peter,
No.
Mike,
No.
Sarah votes yes. The next is the payment of a fiscal year 23 bill for consulting services related to the 40B appeal, which was misplaced and did not get paid So since the fiscal year 23 books have been closed, this requires a new vote at town meeting to spend the money.
Remind me what
What's the amount?
It's just under 10,000. I don't know the exact amount in my head. It will be in the in the motion, or in the article. It's 9,000.
That's something.
And this was to pay Beals and Thomas. We hired Beals and Thomas.
I make a recommendation to vote yes to support this.
Second,
Andy seconds. Any discussion? Vote. Andy,
yes.
Dean,
Yes,
Maury,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes,
Mike,
Yes,
Sarah votes yes. Stormwater regulations update to comply with new EPA requirements. I'm assuming that's not a financial article.
It really isn't.
what is
What?
the regulation? change?
What is it?
Yeah, is there gonna be any more definition of what it is?
Yeah, there's, it's a lot of wordsmithing.
Well, basically, we have to limit our discharge.
It's just, requirements for managing stormwater from projects.
Okay, oh, okay, so it's different.
for projects, not just in.
So this is
Well,
running.
it's
Oh,
both,
both,
but
okay,
it's,
so.
most of the stormwater comes from projects. So we're under, pressure from EPA. If we don't do this, they're likely to slap a consent order on us to comply. They could add penalties to that if they wanted to. if they're concerned.
So that.
So we approved new stormwater regs a couple of years ago based on DEP, the state DEP. Unfortunately, DEP's model that we based it on didn't have all the updates that EPA wanted.
Oh.
So that's why we're doing this a second time around.
I see. So it's a fair assumption this doesn't have financials.
Right. So I make a motion that we take no position on the on the warrant article with respect to stormwater regulations.
Full second.
Any discussion?
It's not gonna cost the town anything, one way or another.
Not that we're already, it's not gonna be more than what we're already doing.
Take a vote. Andy,
Yes.
Dean,
Yes,
Maury,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes,
Mike,
yes,
and Sarah votes yes.
that was yes to not take a position, is that right?
Right, yes.
Yes.
We take no position. And the next is a possible petition article requiring zoning amendments to be approved by ballot. This is the same article that was defeated at last fall's special town meeting. So that has no financial impact. So I make a motion that we take no position with respect to zoning amendments.
and Sarah, did we take that position last time?
So,
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Andy seconds. Take a vote. Andy,
Yes.
Dean,
yes,
Maury,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes,
Sarah votes yes. That's all there is, right?
Well, there's possibility of one more that I left off that list.
What's that?
And that is the potential of of amending the current short-term rental bylaw that the town has. So currently we have a fairly weak bylaw that if you're renting for for 6 days or less, then we need to get a permit. There's concern that with the new state law that will kick in starting in February that allows ADUs by right in single-family home districts, that we may want to have additional safeguards against those ADUs being used for short-term rentals, sort of undercutting the purpose of them in terms of helping with the housing
Got it.
diversity.
And would you use the short-term rental definition that's in the state, which is less than a month?
Most likely, but there's also then additional limitations in terms of, is it owner occupied or not, is the main building owner occupied or not? So Gloucester has just approved a pretty rigorous new bylaw that really tries to prevent proliferation of short-term rentals.
I get that you can try to connect the dots and make this financial, but I'd argue it's not. Is that fair?
I think so, Mike.
I mean, that's the motion I'd like to make, that we do not take a position on it.
Do I
I have a second?
It's not even presented yet.
Well, I think we have to sort of see it in writing, don't we? If you
So we-
can make a meeting.
Maybe we should say
Thing on
we'll
town
make a
meeting floor.
recommendation on town meeting floor.
Yeah.
Okay, Mike,
Yeah, that works.
Let's try it.
have a second?
Second.
Second. Take a vote, Andy,
Yes.
This is that we're deferring to town meeting floor on it.
Why do we have to vote on
because it has to go in the stupid printed warrant.
that? We're gonna, oh. just
On
not
town
that
meeting
far?
floor.
Okay. Continue, sorry.
Dean,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes,
Tom,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Sarah votes yes. Anything else we need to go over? At our 10:30 meeting, we're gonna work on capital. And if there's anything else that people want covered in that meeting, please let me know. By the 23rd, if you can.
Yeah.
I like to get them posted the week in advance. In case that something comes up, and Wednesday comes real fast the next week. With the 48-hour notice requirement.
Overachiever.
With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second. Were you second?
second, yes.
Vote, Andy,
Yes.
Dean,
Yeah.
Lori,
Yes.
Tom.
Yeah.
Peter,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Sarah votes yes. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Or-
Yeah, thank you for your.
Yeah,
That's a lot of
feel
work.
free to give me input.
Will be completed in January.
involved in the price that-
Just.
Sometimes easier to dig in.
Didn't have the lines that we do it, and I was supposed to do it yesterday. I did, they didn't get it over last night. No, I didn't do it. So then this morning I sat down.
Should stay, yeah, thank you.
What's been created looks good.
Oh, good.
One quick.
Oh, shit.
So Kathy, with the season almost over,
Oh, yeah,
how
but
did we
over-
do on our lawn?